Another Lord of the Rings Rise to War video. I'm the player who plays as the King Under the Mountain, and today I am going to be doing a season update review. It is about halfway through the season now. I apologise, I've been a little bit slack with these this season, so I'm going to try and get back into a little bit more of a routine. We are going to go through the normal stuff, so we'll go through the leaderboards. We'll update you on where we're at with the map. We will update you with what's going on with the season in general, not necessarily Diplo, but where people are at with things. I think that's probably fair to do. What kingdoms are fighting which kingdoms, or factions, I suppose, in this case. And we're then going to go through what levels I'm at, like I say, the merit board, that kind of stuff. And then I've got a couple of things that I'd like to briefly touch on. So we've got quite a few battle reports. I've purposely not used a Taunt Tank unit in this season so far, so I'm going to show how my results compare to how I normally feel, how my Barrett situation potentially feels, and that kind of stuff. And I'm also going to touch on, and to be fair, more Turgon really than me finding this out, but I've just been playing around with it today while we're out of season. And it's to do with heal sort of minus percentage in Sauron, with sort of like the prevalence of Undyings flying around, and particularly with us fighting lame this season as well. That heal block might actually be quite interesting. So I'm going to kind of bring that up briefly. I'm not going to do too much on it because I'm not entirely convinced yet. After I've read pretty exclusively about 4 or 5 battle reports, I'm still not convinced about whether it's one way or the other. And some of the stuff when Gil's involved with Swan Knights is absolutely ridiculous for how heal works, particularly with his unique. So we'll go through that. We'll probably start with where we're at with commander levels. We have hit level 50 a couple of days ago. The B team are up to sort of mid 40s, mainly through scrolls, if being honest. But you know, they have got a little bit of XP now. Gear is still exactly the same as what it was. I would probably like to change some stuff before season end if I get a chance, particularly with Dane, but we'll see how that goes. And I'm just going to go straight into the leaderboards, I think. So, personal affluence-wise, we're still in the top 50. We haven't really pushed it. There's nowhere to push it anyway because we can't get tiles anywhere at the moment. So, it is what it is. It's a pretty healthy level. I tend to be able to get myself back to full barracks by the end of the day, so I can't really complain too much, if I'm being honest. As for the merit board, I've snuck my way back into the top 20. I think when I last did a video, I think I was about 5th, and I didn't really get a chance to play properly for a couple of weeks, to be honest, but kind of got back into the swing of things in the last few days. I've gone from about 25th to 15th, so I've sort of pushed that up. And I'll kind of just, briefly go down through the list, because you'll see that there's actually someone representative in here from every single faction, which is pretty cool. And from some teams that you wouldn't necessarily expect, like Denethor's Last Tomato, for example. Gotta love that. So yeah, there's plenty of people from plenty of different teams, and I don't know how I feel about it. Halfway through the season, I feel like this figure's probably just a touch low for 1.2 million. And I'm putting that down to the fact that actually, in reality, there's quite a few strong teams in this server with not too much free merit. But also, it's not just that. It's when it's 3 factions that is kind of the big players, it's very difficult to actually get it so it's a fair fight consistently. And I'll try and touch on that when I go into the map. So, as for actual affluence for the fellowships wise, Wind are top with 3.9, Lamer at 3.8, Bearer at 3.1, Axter at 3, Roar at 2.9. Toby, that's us, 2.9. Daffo, 2.5. Vikings, 2.1. Viking at 1.9. I wonder if they fought over the name at all. Rome, 1.9 in Rune, which is quite cool. You've got Salt at 1.8. Elko at 1.8 and Gaia at 1.4. And then you kind of get down then into Bear and Helve, the smaller sort of teams. But to be fair to Helve, they're having a good war up in the north, and we'll touch on that soon. You'll see there isn't really a great deal in Arnor. And there's not masses in Gondor, but they are having a go at trying to get the capital back, which is quite interesting. So we'll go through that in a minute. But that's kind of where the fellowships are at, affluence-wise. Fairly even, I would say, across the factions, which has kind of made it quite fun so far, to be honest. But there we go. So that's that. We will go into the map. And I will just briefly touch on the pins just to show you what kind of battles are going on at the moment. This is the Northern War I was talking to you about, where Raw are kind of taking a little bit of Erebor up here. They're also fighting Angmar in here with Erebor. And this is kind of all around their capital area, where they're still trying to defend from Erebor, to be honest. And they're doing okay at the minute, I think, by the sounds of things. We have a fairly substantial pin here, which has been going for 5 days in Lorien. And this is between Erebor and Rohan. 7.7 million deaths. Not too bad, really, considering it's not all of everyone there, to be honest. Then on the other side, we have, this one's only started today. I'll kind of touch on it as I go through because it probably makes more sense. Erebor pushed all the way down through here and took the Undeeps, really. They have control of the Undeeps now. They uprooted a lot of Bear players. And then once they've got to this pass, really and truthfully, Bear have had to re-engage them. So hence you see the pin today. This is the pin that I've probably been involved in the most. And it's 18.3 million participants, 6.9 million deaths. And this one's kind of between Mordor and Rohan. There are some smaller pins from where obviously we've been pushed through the lands. And this one here is an interesting pin that's been going on just today. And I've kind of been around there quite a bit, to be perfectly honest. They are quite close to Edoras. I'm not sure how close they'll actually get because, like I say, they've kind of re-engaged Erebor at this point. But there's also a pin over here where Rune are trying to get their capital back from Mordor. And a small pin here with Gondor where Mordor, and again, are trying to defend from Gondor. So probably the two capitals that they thought were going to be the most safest are probably the ones that they're just having to do a little bit of fighting for. So it's quite interesting like that. And like I say, it was a long time since I did my last update on this, so I'll try and talk through what's happened in the map. So we as Rohan pushed up here. Linden basically had no interest really in fighting us, so they went round here. They ended up fighting with Erebor, mainly because they're quite friendly with Angmar, and they were kind of defending Angmar's lands. So they've been kind of going around there. We were also fighting up this way quite a lot, to be honest. This pass was pretty bloody for a week or so. And we did eventually take the pass, but it cost us a lot. So we sent a lot of all our force up here, and we had kind of a smaller force, basically getting pushed back all the time from Mordor through Emna and all through here. And obviously Mordor expanded their border while that was going on. At that time, it was probably a lot of Erebor and Mordor versus us guys, a little bit more. Whereas now it's actually flipped a little bit, and it's probably more Mordor who are taking the brunt of the fights at the moment. And, you know, they're doing well. I would say, without saying too much, they are the strongest team on the server. But sometimes, you know, when you're playing against good teams, 3 or 4 teams can kind of get on top of you a little bit. And they've been brilliant, to be honest. Lame are a great team, particularly tactically. And Bear, even now, not just 1.0 Bear who are great, but I still say Bear now one of the most underrated teams in the game at the moment. And with kind of what they picked up with the Atomic Crew and people like that, I still think they're in that top 3 or 4 fellowships in the game. Resilient, very good movement, pretty crackeny as well at points. So, you have to watch out for them, I think, in the future, because I think they'll give people a good run for the money. So we've kind of been pushed back behind this. We did take this pass back the other day, and then I think it took us about 5 days to capture it because it's on their side, and it took them about 8 hours to get it back. So there were some pretty grumpy people when they woke up that day, to be honest, including me. But other than that, like I say, we are currently fighting in Karas. Erebor had pushed quite far into Karas. We've kind of pushed them back a little bit. We were in Dol Guldur. We've kind of been emptied out of Dol Guldur now, so Erebor kind of own the entire centre. And that's sort of where we're at with the map. I daren't press any red buttons, he says. Mordor have just taken Pelarga, so that's definitely a change to the map, but we'll just have a quick look at that. So Mordor are definitely sort of expanding across. Quite interesting, really, taking over pretty much the entirety of Gondor, so interesting way of going about things. And that's kind of where that's at. So I can't show all the battle reports because a lot of them have actually timed out. And I'm just going to talk through, I think it's from about the 19th. I mean, there's still plenty in here, to be honest. I'm going to talk through what I've done. And I'm going to talk through how it's working. and I'm not entirely convinced it can work without Woses, to be perfectly frank. So just to kind of sort of go back through what my gear is, what my respect levels are. It's not a small account. It's not the biggest, but it's not a small account, right? So this is kind of where we're at right now. I have made a change to the Sauron build in the most recent battle reports, so we'll see how that goes. And this is quite an expensive army. Kevin's is a good player, but what I have done here is I'm not playing with a Taunt Tank like a Troll, for example. One, they're very slow. Two, I just found them too expensive. And if you get into a true war, like I would say we've been for the last week or so, you need to find something that you can grind. Now, Woses have definitely been the find of the season for me. I hoped they were going to be, and they definitely have been. They are the same cost resource-wise as a Guardian. So they're pretty beefy, but they give you those first 4 rounds of initiative. And it also gives the commander initiative. And it just means in this formation, my Dane goes first for 4 rounds, which is really, really potent. And it stops him getting... I found he got a lot of CC from sort of Saruman, for example. He was getting madness from Saruman, he was getting stuns. Kind of cut some of that out. I have been using tier 2s on Saruman. I was using Woses on him for a little while, but it's quite unsustainable to run 2 lines of them if you fight a lot. Useful, but quite unsustainable. So I always kind of use the tier 2 bow knights, and it also gives me a counter across my army for when people are perhaps running smalls, which in this case they're not, to be fair, but a lot of lame in particular do run smalls. So that was that. We then have a fight with Icy Kyle, and it'd be interesting to see this one later on versus the one that I've just had, because I think the troop combination is the same. I used Rangers of the North for a little while, and what I will say with Rangers of the North was I actually found them very good, and if I could afford to keep them, I probably would, to be honest. I thought, in general, they're quite good. They've got decent defensive stats anyway, good HP, fairly cheap for a tier 4, and the protection they give to 1 unit from normal attacks, generally, in this case it was clearly Gandalf, I found them really, really good to use, and I was getting good results while I had them used. The only thing I will say is, with this now meaning I had 3 ranged in my army, and look, that's a seriously resource-heavy comp that I'd be there, and it's not shabby either. Don't get me wrong, okay, R6 Undying, but the gear is not shabby, so I can't complain too much about that. What I found was, because Gandalf's my only melee, even though I've got quite high command and a fairly okay amount of unit defense, he was quite squishy, and he was taking a bit too much damage for me, so I kind of moved away from him a little bit until I refigured that out. Hoon's another good player, and again, this is where I switched again. So then I thought, right, okay, well, what else can I do? I can get a little bit more expensive than a Guardian. I can give myself a unit counter, potentially, if people are running smalls, which a lot of people do, particularly on Dane, because Guardian's just easier to crank out. And with Woses becoming more prevalent, I thought, okay, let's go into the counter system, see how we get on. And I found Katas on Sauron really good. And again, I don't feel so far that I've overly missed trolls. And I found this combination quite sustainable, to be perfectly honest. So, interesting, because, like I say, Hoon's a good player as well. So, these kind of results, pretty happy with that. And also using the woes as well. But, like I say, as a tank troop, they kind of survive, so I don't mind paying that a little bit more. Again, Leopard, a good player. Again, using this combo of troops, I found it that I can kind of get my barracks to, by the end of the day, when I wake up in the morning, I can pretty much have it back full, if not full, very close to full. I would assume I've just died by the way that I can now see 3 reports there. But anyway, we'll look at that later. We then fought Rek, who again, good player, and this combo I found was standing up really nicely against some really resource-heavy comps. Seeing a lot of Isildurs running around. What I like about Lame is they use a lot of different stuff. I mean, it's not every day you see that, to be honest, but that's pretty cool from Irma. But yeah, I was pretty happy with that. Again, it's pretty cheap and pretty sustainable. It doesn't always work, and I'll show you the pitfalls of when it kind of comes in. Again, Maximus using the sort of Woses combination and Saruman with the tier 2 Bow Knights. Again, really, really pleasing results. Damage spreads quite nice across these as well. I still don't get the Galadriel thing. It's not for me, put it that way. I like half trolls on Dane. That's a Z12 Dane that you just saw there from Simcoe. Z6 Gandalf the White and R10 Bjorn. And again, this is where I went for double Woses. Nice report, all smalls. My only problem with running all smalls, even though it does tank quite well, is that you're very susceptible to counters. If someone runs Marauders on Bjorn, for example, you are in a world of pain, and he will just rip your army apart. So I don't like to do that, so I can at least not get all countered. Again, we beat Morgan here. Dane wasn't actually employed. The reason why I wanted to put this in was just to show that Galadriel doesn't always save Swan Knights, which I'm pretty sure NJ and Morgan kind of said that happened. I know it's a little bit of a cheat, but you know what I'm saying. In fairness, he's actually done quite well there, all things considered. Again, Sephirin, and this combo, like I say, I'm just going to keep showing you because I think it's, like, for what it does, it's really good. And the results I've been getting, I've been very happy with. What doesn't go well is when you hit someone like a Kitten, for example, who basically turns around and just says, delete your barracks, please. And I say, okay. And that's kind of how we get on. Another Galadriel, this kind of double tier 4 kind of combination is something that they use a lot with troop buffing, which is quite interesting. Phoenix was a big 1.0 whale. And again, that combo's come out really well on top. We'd wipe that without pretty much any more loss, I would say, after the draw. It's nice to see some different stuff from Lame. They do some really different comps. I always struggle versus any of the Atomics, I feel like. All really solid players. I was okay with this because I would say from a resource point of view, I've won that out, even though he's got a few Guardians left. But still lost in the book, so that was that. 2 seasons I've been trying to beat Escobar, and I feel like I should do, but he seems to run a really solid formation. And I really struggle to beat him. Even though I probably outgear him, which is really irritating. But yeah, fairly, not exactly expensive, but more expensive than my formation. And again, it's just consistent for Dane damage. The kind of numbers that you put out with him are pretty impressive. Again, we've got Dr. Horse Ezronos, who are running that same combo. We've got plenty of examples of this. I just wanted to flick through as much as I could just to kind of show people. It is sustainable. There is so many battle reports I could show. Nice Undying report, this one for me. R5 Undying, but with really good gear. Gandalf the White, Z3 King of Men. And this is what I mean by they've got some cool stuff. And this is also what I mean by Bjorn doing serious damage when he has a counter. So I kind of need to stop that. But I was pretty happy with that as well. I think this is the same fight, potentially. A slightly better version of the same fight for me. I mean, I'll take it as far as it goes. Again, lots of chariots. Just thought I'd throw this one in there because this is what I'm running as the B team this season. I have gone for 3 damage dealers. Thankfully, my gear is pretty interchangeable. So Witch King is currently dropped to the C team. But I was pretty happy with that. I mean, there's some purple gear in there, but there's a lot of stuff. And this is what kind of bugs me a little bit sometimes. People can run around with this to path with and then don't move when you hit them. Like, I would love to have that kind of resources. Like, I'm still gutted here that I've lost that many eagles. This is what can happen when you hit someone who's very good, who's very well defended. What I will caveat this with is, this is a much bigger account than mine. So you've got a Z15 Dane, who looks like we've gone completely into the unit defense with all the extra points, which is fair if you're not going to run small units. R15 Saruman, 3 Refine Unique, and also running the Agility set, so I can't really get it faster than him there either, which is annoying. Really nice Sauron. And then a Z15 Gandalf the White. I mean, that is something people can only dream of right there for people like me. So there you go. So, in fairness, I shouldn't compete with that formation. But I was still disappointed with this result because it's probably the worst one I'd had with him. But I won't show that in. If you hit something with Swan Knights that's a very, very good formation and it has the counter on something like a Dane, you're in trouble. Just the point. I think this might be the same fight. Oh, it's a slightly different fight. I think this was his main. He obviously had more chariots left. As you do. And then, again, you know, cheap and cheerful. I can't complain at losing 3/4 of an army for that. Kitten every time pummels me. And this is why. So Z1. I mean, it's disgusting. But really nice person, sadly, annoyingly. But yeah, it tears me apart every time I fight. And Saruman did not turn up for this one, I don't think. Again, another report versus Phoenix. Pretty similar result to last time. Again, we'll do a lot of damage in the follow-up to that fight because his Isildur's actually nearly dead as well. So it wouldn't take much to kill him or him. It's a good result, that, really. We also fought Sea Bear. I haven't seen Sea Bear much this season. I saw him a lot last season, so it just shows you that Bear haven't really been over our side until the last couple of days. Again, great result for me. I'm not seeing any difference so far with what I'm running for a tank. I think it's quite interesting. Morgan again here. Got me the other way around, actually. And I got out-healed, which is always annoying when I get out-healed. Sometimes happens with Undying as well, but I'm hoping I'll be able to change that now, but that's a different thing. I was really impressed with this earlier on versus Kitten. So this was trying to defend my fort, and I couldn't run away fast enough to take the second hit, but actually the second hit went okay in the end. So that was the first hit. Pretty happy with that. And then the second hit, even though he's not full, again, I'm pretty happy with that. I mean, it's pretty much an even trade, even against his main there, which is disgusting, but there you go. So that's that. We had Sephrin. I think these are from earlier on. So yeah, again, Sephrin's got a nice formation. Full Refine, Gil Unique. This fight was interesting. This is the fight that actually baffled me. So I tried to use this fight because he got a healing Gandalf the Grey and a healing Gil to see if this worked, right? So what I've done is I've changed my build. I'll explain why. If I had some more points, I would have this full, but I do not. So if I was respect 13, I would have this full, which I now think is probably, without going into serious NFs, this is probably what I'll experiment with for a while. So Gothar I've dropped to 1. Of course, you still want the stun every 3 rounds. If anything, I'm quite okay with the fact that it no longer has Keen Eye. I'm alright with that, even though it's sort of an extra piece of White Council strip. But still, I am missing out on this focus damage receive plus 15% for 2 rounds, which is annoying, right? But I do want to test this out. So the theory here, and this is where Turgon said it to me, and I kind of always figured that this was because it was 1 round for the madness, it was 1 round for everything else, but actually the commander focus is all fight, so I'm assuming this will be all fight. And as we're seeing more Undyings and more healing, this skill hits 2 formations, and I'll kind of show it how it works in the battle report. So what it does on round 3, I don't know why if ever you go to round 3 it always goes back to round 2. So if I go down to here and find Sauron. Okay, there you go. So healing effects on 2 formations minus 50%. Now this is if this lasts the whole fight, which it looks like it does from the reports that I've read, that is a massive debuff to Undying's heal. Because probably likelihood is both the formations he's only getting half the healing. So it's quite interesting to try that. Interesting versus lame in general because they do use Galadriels and people like that. So I'm intrigued to see how that works. I'm going to find more about that. I don't want to talk about it too heavily right now in case it's not quite right because I'm missing out on a lot of damage for Saruman. But to be fair, I mean, it's probably missing 15k, which is annoying actually. We'll check this one. I mean, he's inconsistent at the best times. Sometimes between sort of 85 and 130, depending on what Dane's done and what he's hitting. So, actually, he was full, but he was lower level. So, I don't know. Don't know how I feel about that yet. But on this one, unfortunately, I couldn't even look to see if the Undying thing had actually helped me. Mainly because I actually hit myself with Lord of Gifts, which was stupid. So the theory is that it halves the heal, but it halves the heal for the whole fight. So on people like a Galadriel, when they're casting their healing, or on a Gandalf the Grey, for example, is casting their healing, or on a Gil-galad with the unique who's casting their healing for the whole fight, it also massively affects them. King of Men also. So interesting to look at, and it hasn't quite made me change my build completely yet. I still think I'll probably prefer this. But I don't get the extra bit in there anyway, because I only ever get to 9 because I still want the 1 point in here. So really, I just need to get to Respect 13 and then I can figure out which way around the build goes. But I found the early initial reports quite interesting, and I don't feel like I've lost too much from the formation. There you see 137k. Silence, also a good player. What have I got here? 5k health. Still nearly took him down, so it's interesting, is what I'm gonna say with the Sauron thing, and with that troop formation, I do feel it's very sustainable. So in my barracks, I've been pretty extensively fighting for 2 or 3 days, and I'm still at 100k running that, because of the way that the system works now. I run out of resources by the end of the day, yes, but by the time I wake up, I can replenish, put the 25k back in, and everything else, and I've got more by the time I've gone through the merit store. So by middle of the day, I'm kind of back to full barracks, which I think is where we all want to be, I would guess. So I just kind of wanted to bring that up. I'm not saying that is definitely changes Sauron to that build. I'm just saying, as you see more Undyings, you're pretty much halving one of his main skills. Or if you see more Galadriels, you're halving a lot of that healing. So the other one, obviously, as well, that we kind of discussed at a different time, but is Gimli. And Gimli with this one here, every couple of rounds also does the minus 50% for healing. So again, interesting one to run, and you might see as Undying gets more prevalent in the meta. Gimli might get used a little bit more, which would be pretty cool, because I know there's quite a few Zenith Gimlis running around that people don't use much. So with a full refine unique, it's pretty spicy. And that is, at this point, pretty much everything I wanted to cover at this point. I will keep you updated on the server. I will keep you updated on this cheap sort of troop comp that I've created, which is working pretty well, like you've seen there from the reports. Don't get me wrong, it can get hammered, but then it still wins on resource trades in a lot of the cases. So I can't really complain about that. I'll keep you updated on the Sauron thing also, but some of the battle reports are just a shambles to read. So if in doubt, as always, in the meantime, follow your nose.